I saw you slip that perfume into your bag. The manager's voice cracked across the luxury store like a gunshot, every head turning toward the young woman in the wheelchair. She didn't flinch, but the man beside her did. Because when James Nicholas stepped between them, he had no idea the woman he was defending wasn't just innocent. She was someone powerful men had spent years trying to erase. Before we dive in, where are you watching from, and what kind of story do you want to see next? Drop it in the comments. And if stories like this pull you in and don't let go, go ahead, hit subscribe. I have another powerful one coming tomorrow. Now, let's get into the story. Don't think being in that chair means you can steal from me. James Nicholas froze mid-reach for a greeting card, his 9-year-old son Ethan's hand instinctively gripping his jacket. It was supposed to be a simple errand. Find a card for his late wife's memorial, maybe grab lunch after. Nothing complicated. Nothing life-changing. The woman being accused sat perfectly still in her wheelchair, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. But it wasn't her appearance that caught James's attention. It was the way she held herself, spine straight, shoulders squared, even as Jeff, the store manager, loomed over her like a storm about to break. "Sir, I did not take anything," the woman said, her voice steady despite the small crowd beginning to form. "You're welcome to check my bag, check the cameras, but I won't be spoken to this way." The security guard, a younger man with nervous eyes, shifted his weight uncomfortably beside the register. Other shoppers had stopped browsing, some pulling out their phones, others whispering behind cupped hands. James noticed how the woman's legs remained completely motionless in the wheelchair. Not a twitch, not a shift. The kind of stillness that spoke of something permanent. "Dad," Ethan whispered, pressing closer against his side. "Why is that man being mean to her?" Before James could answer, Jeff grabbed the woman's bag, dumping its contents onto the counter with unnecessary force. A worn leather wallet tumbled out, followed by tissues, a folded newspaper clipping, a phone with a cracked screen, and a single key fob. Nothing else. No perfume. No stolen goods. "Maybe you hid it somewhere else," Jeff sneered, reaching toward the wheelchair's side pocket. "People like you." That's when James moved. "That's enough." His voice cut through the store like a command. He positioned himself between Jeff and the woman, his work-worn hands visible as he crossed his arms. "You've checked her bag. There's nothing there." Jeff's face reddened further. "This isn't your business, Nicholas. Take your kid and finish shopping." "It became my business when you started harassing a customer without proof," James replied. He could feel Ethan hiding behind his leg now, but he didn't move. Something about this moment felt important, the kind of moment that defines who you are when no one's keeping score. The woman looked up at him, dark eyes holding a mixture of surprise and something else. Relief, maybe. Or recognition that someone had finally seen her as more than just the chair. "Are you okay, miss?" James asked, turning slightly toward her while keeping Jeff in his peripheral vision. "I'm Linda," she said, gathering her scattered belongings with deliberate calm, though James could see her hands trembling slightly. "I'm fine, thank you. But I can handle this." "Can you?" Jeff spat. "Tony, call the police. I want her arrested for shoplifting." The security guard, Tony, scratched his head nervously. "Mr. Jeff, the cameras would show if she took something. Want me to check the footage first?" "Don't bother. But she's not welcome here anymore." Jeff's eyes narrowed at Linda. "Her kind." James's jaw tightened. The words hung in the air like a challenge. "What kind is that?" James's voice had dropped to a dangerous quiet. Jeff stammered. "I mean, troublemakers. People who what? Use wheelchairs." Behind him, James heard Ethan zip up his backpack, the sound somehow louder than it should have been. "Dad." Ethan tugged at his jacket. "Can we help her?" Sometimes children see the world more clearly than adults ever could. James looked down at his son, those eyes so much like his mother's had been, full of that same fierce sense of right and wrong that had made him fall in love all those years ago. 3 years since they'd lost her to that sudden illness. And here was Ethan, carrying that same light forward. "Yeah, buddy. We can help." He turned back to Jeff. "You know what? We're done shopping here. Permanently." "You're lost," Jeff muttered, but his bravado was cracking. James bent down, helping Linda gather the last of her things. Ethan, following his father's lead, picked up the newspaper clipping that had slid under a display stand and handed it to Linda with a shy smile. "Thank you," Linda said softly, looking between them. "Both of you. It's nice to know there are still decent people in the world. There's more of us than you'd think, James replied. Can we walk you to your car? The autumn wind hit them hard as they exited the store, and James instinctively moved to shield Linda from the worst of it. Her chair moved smoothly despite the uneven sidewalk, and he noticed how expertly she navigated around the cracks and dips. This wasn't new to her. You really didn't have to do that, Linda said as they reached a modest sedan parked in the handicapped space. Most people just look away. Is that what you wanted us to do? James asked. She smiled, really smiled, and something in her face transformed. No, I suppose not. James watched as she transferred herself from the wheelchair to the driver's seat with practiced movements. No hesitation, no need for help. Her upper body was strong, compensating for what her legs could no longer do. The car had hand controls, he noticed. Specially modified, but otherwise unremarkable. Not the kind of car you'd expect from someone who supposedly came for money. I'm James, by the way. James Nicholas. This is my son, Ethan. Hi. Ethan said, waving enthusiastically. I like your car. It has special controls. Linda laughed, a genuine warm sound. It does, doesn't it? Makes driving an adventure. We need to find a new grocery store anyway, James said. Jefferson's prices were too high. Know any good places around here? There's Franklin's Market, 2 blocks east. The owner is actually decent. Plus, they have those cart seats kids love, the ones shaped like race cars. Ethan's eyes lit up. Dad, can we go there instead? Sounds like a plan. He hesitated, then asked, do you shop there often? Saturdays, usually around this time, actually. Their eyes met, and an understanding passed between them. Not a promise, not quite, but a possibility. Maybe we'll see you there sometime, James said. Maybe you will. As they watched Linda drive away, Ethan looked up at his father. Dad, why was that man so mean to her? James knelt down to his son's level, the same way he had 100 times before. When he'd had to explain why Mommy wasn't coming home from the hospital. When he'd had to tell him they couldn't afford the new tablet all his friends had. When the world seemed too big and too harsh for a 9-year-old to understand. Sometimes, buddy, people see differences and get scared. Or angry. Or both. But she wasn't different. She was just sitting in a chair with wheels instead of standing. Exactly. He pulled Ethan close. You've got your mom's heart. You know that. The thing about grief is that it doesn't announce itself. It shows up in shopping malls and autumn wind. In the way October light slants through store windows exactly like it did 3 years ago when James had stood outside the hospital, unable to process what the doctor had just told him. Sudden cardiac arrest. Nothing anyone could have done. But grief also teaches you things. It teaches you that life is shorter than you think. That kindness matters more than being comfortable. That standing up for someone else can sometimes help you remember how to stand up for yourself. Over the next few weeks, Saturdays at Franklin's Market became a new routine. And yes, Linda was there, always around the same time, always alone, always with that same quiet dignity that had first caught James's attention. They started with nods of recognition, then small talk by the produce section, then longer conversations while Ethan pushed the race car cart making engine noises that echoed through the aisles. You're a teacher? James asked one Saturday, 3 weeks after the Jefferson's incident, selecting apples while Linda examined pears nearby. Linda corrected, her voice careful. Literature and ethics. But that was, before. She didn't elaborate on before, and James didn't push. He understood about befores and afters. His own life was divided that way too. Ethan's struggling with reading, he admitted. His teacher says he's falling behind. I try to help, but after double shifts at the warehouse, I'm not much good at anything except making sure he's fed and gets to bed on time. I could help, Linda offered, then quickly added, if you'd like. I still remember all the tricks for making books come alive for kids. I couldn't pay much. I wasn't asking for payment. Linda's voice was firm. Consider it a thank you. For standing up for me that day. You don't owe me anything for that. No, she agreed. But maybe I want to help anyway. Novel concept, right? People doing things just because they want to. That's how Linda Charles entered their lives properly. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons at the small apartment James and Ethan called home. The place wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that doubled as a dining room, and a living room barely big enough for a second-hand couch and a TV that only worked half the time. But Linda never seemed to notice or care about the water stain on the ceiling or the radiator that clanged like chains in the night. She'd arrive in her chair, books balanced in her lap, and transform their tiny living room into whole worlds. She taught Ethan that letters were just symbols waiting to become stories, that words were magic spells that could take you anywhere. "Your wife would have loved her," Ethan said one evening after Linda had left and was getting ready for bed, clutching the book Linda had given him, The Secret Garden. James stood in the doorway, watching his son, and felt something shift in his chest. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. What James didn't know was that Linda Charles wasn't who she appeared to be. Behind her modest car and quiet life was a secret that would soon shatter everything, and turn their simple act of kindness into something far more dangerous than either of them could imagine. Because 5 years ago, Linda Charles had died. Or at least, that's what the entire world believed. James discovered he was internet famous at 6:47 a.m. on Sunday morning. His phone had been buzzing since midnight, notifications piling up like snow in a blizzard. He'd silenced it, too exhausted from the double shift before yesterday's mall trip to Care. But when he finally checked it over his first cup of coffee, the screen was flooded with notifications from apps he didn't even remember having. At Justice Watch tagged you, "This is what standing up looks like." Raising hands. At Daily Good News shared your video, "Single dad defends disabled woman from false accusation, justice served." 47 missed calls. 213 text messages. 1,847 new followers. What the hell? James clicked on the first link and his stomach dropped. There it was, grainy cell phone footage from yesterday. The angle was from behind the crowd, but the audio was crystal clear. Jeff's sneering voice. Linda's dignified response. And then James, stepping forward with Ethan partially visible behind his leg. That's enough. The video had 2.3 million views. Dad. Ethan shuffled into the kitchen in his dinosaur pajamas, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Why is your phone making so much noise?" "Someone recorded what happened yesterday," James said slowly, scrolling through comments that ranged from heartfelt praise to marriage proposals to, disturbingly, people offering him money. "It's everywhere." "Are we famous?" Ethan's eyes went wide. "I don't know, buddy. Maybe for a few days." What James couldn't see, was the other conversation happening in the comments section. The one buried 400 comments deep, written by an account with no profile picture. "That woman in the wheelchair. Is that Linda Charles? The one who died in 2020. Followed by another. "No way. Linda Charles is dead. This is just someone who looks like her." And then a third, more ominous. "Zoom in on her face at 047. That's her. I worked security at Charles Group headquarters. I'd know that face anywhere." By Monday morning, James had been interviewed by 3 local news stations, received job offers from 2 companies he'd never heard of, and had a voicemail from someone claiming to be a Hollywood producer. It was surreal, overwhelming, and deeply uncomfortable. "I just did what anyone should do," he told the 4th reporter who cornered him outside the warehouse. "Can we please just let this die down?" But the internet doesn't let things die down. It amplifies them. What worried James more than the attention was something else entirely. He hadn't heard from Linda. Not a text, not a call. He tried reaching out yesterday evening, but the number she'd given him went straight to voicemail. By Monday afternoon, the silence felt wrong. Maybe she doesn't want to be part of this circus, he thought. Maybe I should just leave her alone. But Ethan had other ideas. "Dad, we should check on her," Ethan said that evening, holding up a drawing he'd been working on, a stick figure in a wheelchair with a cape flowing behind her. Across the top in crayon, superhero in a chair. "Buddy, I don't think she wants visitors right now." "But what if she's sad because of the video? You always say we should check on people when they're sad." James looked at his son and saw his wife staring back at him, that same stubborn kindness that refused to accept excuses. "All right," he sighed. "Let's go." Franklin's market was closed by the time they arrived, but the owner, an older man named Carl, was locking up. "You're that guy from the video," Carl said, recognition lighting up his face. "Good on you, son. World needs more folks like you." "Thanks. Listen, do you know where Linda lives? The woman from the video? I want to check on her." Carl hesitated, clearly torn between privacy and helpfulness. Finally, He pulled out a notepad and scribbled an address. Riverside Apartments, Unit 2C. But don't tell her I gave it to you. And go easy, she values her privacy. Riverside Apartments was a modest 3-story building on the east side of town, the kind of place with cracked concrete steps and a lobby door that didn't quite close properly. Unit 2C was on the ground floor, accessible without stairs. James knocked, suddenly uncertain. What if she really didn't want to see him? What if he was crossing a line? The door opened a crack, security chain still attached. Linda's face appeared in the gap, and for a split second, James saw something he hadn't seen before: fear. James. Her voice was careful, guarded. I'm sorry to just show up like this. I tried calling, but I changed my number. She glanced past him, scanning the parking lot like she expected someone else. You shouldn't be here. I drew you a picture. Ethan piped up, holding up his crayon masterpiece. You're a superhero. Something in Linda's expression softened. She looked at the drawing, then at Ethan's hopeful face, and the chain rattled as she unhooked it. Come in. Quickly. The apartment was small but immaculate. Hardwood floors, minimal furniture, everything arranged for wheelchair accessibility. But what struck James immediately were the details that didn't fit. The books on the shelf weren't paperbacks, they were leather-bound first editions. The laptop on the desk was top of the line. And there, half hidden behind a throw pillow, was what looked like a Mont Blanc pen, the kind that cost more than James made in a week. Who is she? Thank you for this, Linda said to Ethan, accepting the drawing with genuine warmth. It's beautiful. Should I hang it on my fridge? Yes. Ethan beamed. Dad says superheroes inspire people. You inspired me. Linda's eyes glistened, but she smiled. Well then, I better live up to it. While Ethan explored the wheelchair-accessible kitchen, James lowered his voice. Are you okay? You seem scared. Linda's refined composure wavered. Her speech, James noticed now, had the cadence of someone educated at expensive schools. Precise diction, carefully chosen words. She caught herself mid-sentence sometimes, as if remembering to sound more ordinary. The video, she said quietly. It's been complicated. I'm sorry. I didn't know anyone was recording. It's not your fault. She moved to the window, checking the parking lot again. It's just that some people I thought I'd left behind, they might have seen it. James was about to ask what she meant when her phone, sitting on the coffee table, buzzed. Linda's face went from pale to white. She wheeled over quickly, but not quickly enough. James caught a glimpse of the screen. Unknown number, we know you're alive. The phone buzzed again. Did you really think you could hide forever? And then a third message, this one with an attachment. A photo. It was Linda. Younger, standing, in an elegant gown at some kind of gala, champagne glass in hand, standing beside a distinguished older man in a tuxedo. Behind them, a banner read, Charles Group 50th Anniversary Gala. Linda's hands trembled as she grabbed the phone, turning it face down. But the damage was done. Linda, James said carefully. Who are you? She didn't answer. She just stared at her hands, those strong, capable hands that had gathered her dignity off a store floor, and for the first time since he'd met her, Linda Charles looked utterly, terrifyingly helpless. Ethan, James called, keeping his voice steady. Buddy, go wait by the door for a minute, okay? When his son was out of earshot, James knelt beside Linda's wheelchair, his voice low and urgent. I don't know what's happening, but if you're in danger. You should go, Linda whispered. Both of you. Before this gets worse. Linda. Please. She looked up at him, and those dark eyes held something James recognized instantly. The same look his wife had given him in the hospital, when she knew the end was coming but didn't want to scare him. It was the look of someone trying to protect people they cared about. I can't drag you into this, she said. You and Ethan. You're good people. You deserve better than. Her phone buzzed again. See you soon, Linda. Uncle Raymond sends his regards. The room suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. James didn't understand what was happening. Not fully. But he understood one thing with absolute clarity. Linda Charles, whoever she really was in serious danger. And despite every logical reason to walk away, despite the warning bells screaming in his head, James knew he wasn't going anywhere. Tell me the truth, he said. All of it. And then let me help you. Linda closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, the mask she'd been wearing finally cracked. "My name is Linda Charles," she said, her voice breaking. "And 5 years ago, I was supposed to die." The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. James stayed perfectly still, kneeling beside Linda's wheelchair, watching as 5 years of carefully constructed anonymity crumbled before his eyes. In the kitchen, Ethan hummed quietly to himself, blissfully unaware that the world his father knew was quietly reshaping itself into something far more dangerous. "Linda Charles," James repeated slowly, testing the name. It sounded familiar, the kind of familiar that comes from half-remembered news headlines you scrolled past without reading. The Charles Group. That's one of the largest luxury fashion conglomerates in the country, Linda finished. Her voice had changed now, no longer the careful modesty of someone trying to blend in, but the crisp authority of someone who'd once commanded boardrooms. "My father, Gregory Charles, built it from nothing. 30 years of work, turning a single boutique into an empire worth $3 billion. She wheeled herself to the window again, though James suspected she wasn't really looking for threats outside anymore. She was looking inward, at memories that clearly still cut deep. 5 years ago, I was 23 years old, she continued. Fresh out of business school, ready to take my place in the company. My father had groomed me for it since I was 16, taught me everything about the business, about integrity, about treating people with dignity no matter their station. Her voice caught. He was a good man, James. The kind who remembered the names of every janitor, every security guard, who refused to outsource manufacturing overseas because he believed in fair wages and safe working conditions. The board hated him for it. Said he was leaving money on the table. What happened? James asked quietly. Linda's hands tightened on the armrests of her wheelchair. October 14, 2020. My father and I were driving back from a charity gala. It had been raining all evening, one of those autumn storms where you can barely see 5 feet ahead. We were on Riverside Highway when she stopped, steadying her breath. The brakes failed. Completely. My father tried everything. Emergency brake, downshifting, nothing worked. We went off the road doing 70 miles per hour. The car flipped 3 times before hitting a tree. James felt his chest tighten. He knew this story, not the details, but the shape of it. The sudden violence of loss, the way one moment can sever your life into before and after. My father died on impact, Linda said, and her voice was eerily calm now, the kind of calm that comes from repeating a trauma so many times it becomes a script. I survived, but my spine was severed at L1. The doctors said I'd never walk again. I was in the ICU for 2 weeks. Critical condition. The media was camped outside the hospital. And then they declared you dead, James said, pieces clicking together. Linda nodded. My uncle, Raymond Charles, my father's younger brother, he was appointed interim CEO immediately. He visited me once in the hospital. I'll never forget it. I was barely conscious, tubes everywhere, and he leaned close and whispered, "This can go one of 2 ways, Linda. You can be the tragic heir who died with her father, mourned and memorialized. Or you can be the crippled girl who drags this company down with her pity parade. Choose wisely." The cruelty of it made James's jaw clench. He gave me 72 hours to decide, Linda continued. Said the company couldn't survive the scandal, the sympathy, the liability of a paralyzed heir. He had the doctors convinced I was in shock, not thinking clearly. Had lawyers draft documents that would transfer all control to him temporarily, while I recovered. But you refused, James said. I tried to. Linda's laugh was bitter. I told him I'd fight him. That my father built this company on principles Raymond didn't understand, and I wouldn't let him tear it apart for profit. That's when he showed me the alternative. She pulled up something on her phone, a news article from October 2020. The headline read, "Tragedy strikes Charles family. Founder and daughter killed in horrific crash." He had already released the statement, Linda said. Told the world I died in surgery. Held a closed casket funeral. By the time I was stable enough to fight back, I was legally dead. My assets frozen, my identity erased from all company records. He even had my medical records sealed under privacy laws, claimed it was to protect my dignity in death. James sat back on his heels, stunned. How did he get away with it? Money. Lawyers. And the fact that I had no allies left, Linda said. My mother died when I was 12. I was an only child. My father's business partners were Raymond's friends first. The board wanted someone ruthless, someone who'd prioritize profit over people. Raymond was their man. So you just vanished? What choice did I have? Linda's voice cracked with old anger. I was 23, paralyzed, and legally deceased. I had no access to my inheritance, no way to prove who I was without triggering alarms that would bring Raymond's lawyers down on me. So I disappeared properly. Changed my appearance, took my mother's maiden name, Brennan. Started teaching literature online under pseudonyms. Built a life so small and quiet that no one would ever look twice. She gestured around the modest apartment. This isn't poverty, James. It's camouflage. I have enough money hidden away, accounts Raymond didn't know about, cash my father kept in safety deposit boxes for emergencies. Enough to live simply. To stay invisible. Until Saturday, James said. Until Saturday, Linda echoed. Until a decent man decided to stand up for a stranger, and someone recorded it, and the video went viral. She looked at him, and her eyes held something close to despair. I've been so careful for 5 years. So careful. And then one moment of kindness undoes everything. You can't blame yourself for someone else doing the right thing, James said firmly. I'm not blaming you. I'm blaming myself for getting complacent. For thinking I could have a normal Saturday at the mall. For thinking I was safe. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. The car you're driving is registered to Linda Brennan. Clever. But we found the parking tickets, the utility bills. Uncle Raymond is very thorough when he wants to be. Linda's composure finally shattered. They know where I live. They've been watching me. This apartment, everything, it's compromised. James's mind raced. We need to call the police. And tell them what? That a legally dead woman is being threatened by the uncle who staged her death with help from lawyers and doctors and a media blackout? They'd think I was insane. Or they'd call Raymond to verify, and he'd have me committed for psychiatric evaluation before I could blink. There has to be something. James, you need to take Ethan and leave. Now. Before they connect you to me beyond that video. Before you become a liability they need to handle. I'm not leaving you here alone. I've been alone for 5 years. Linda's voice rose, sharp with fear and frustration. I know how to disappear. But you? You have a son. A life. You can't. The sound of footsteps outside the door froze them both. Heavy. Deliberate. Then a knock, 3 sharp raps that somehow carried menace. Linda Charles, a muffled voice called. We need to talk. Mr. Raymond Charles sent us to. Linda's eyes met James's, and in that split second, they both understood, this wasn't a conversation. This was a retrieval. James moved fast, scooping Ethan up from the kitchen. We're going out the back. Now. There is no back exit, Linda said, her voice tight. Ground floor, remember? We're trapped. The doorknob rattled. Someone was testing it. James looked at the window, large enough, accessible, leading to the side parking lot. Not ideal, but it would work. Can you transfer yourself through a window? James, no. Can you? Linda's jaw set. Yes. Then we're leaving. All 3 of us. Another knock, harder this time. Miss Brennan? We know you're in there. This doesn't have to be difficult. James didn't waste time arguing. He grabbed Linda's wheelchair, positioned it by the window, and started unlocking the latch. Because somewhere across town, in an upscale office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, Jeff, the store manager who'd accused Linda of theft, was ending a phone call. Yes, sir, Mr. Charles. I confirmed it's her. The team's at her apartment now. They'll have her secured within the hour. Good work, Jeff. Raymond Charles's voice was smooth, satisfied. See that you're compensated appropriately. The Charles Group takes care of those who serve its interests. Jeff hung up and stared at the check on his desk. $50,000. Enough to finally get out of that dead-end retail job. He told himself it was just business. He told himself she'd be fine. He told himself it wasn't his problem what happened next. But late that night, when the news broke that Linda Brennan's apartment had been broken into and ransacked, and that a single father and his son were now wanted for questioning, Jeff would stop telling himself anything at all. Because by then, the lies would already be too loud to ignore. They made it out through the window with 30 seconds to spare. James had gone first, helping Linda transfer through the opening while Ethan clutched his father's phone, instructed to call 911 if anyone tried to stop them. By the time Raymond's men kicked in the apartment door, the three of them were already in James's decade-old Honda, pulling out of the parking lot with headlights off. "Where are we going?" Ethan asked from the back seat, his voice small but steady. "Somewhere safe," James said, though he had no idea where that was. Linda sat rigid in the passenger seat, her wheelchair hastily folded in the trunk. "James, you shouldn't have." "We'll talk about what I should or shouldn't have done later," he cut her off gently. "Right now, we just drive." They ended up at a motel 40 minutes outside town, the kind of place that took cash and didn't ask questions. James got 2 adjoining rooms. Ethan fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted by the adrenaline crash. In the silence that followed, Linda finally spoke. "Thank you. For not leaving me. You really thought I would?" "Most people would have." She looked down at her hands. "Most people did." That was 3 weeks ago. In the strange mathematics of crisis, 3 weeks can feel like 3 months or 3 days depending on how you measure time. For James, it was measured in small moments that somehow added up to everything. It was measured in the way Linda insisted on paying her share of groceries despite James's protests, pulling out carefully saved cash from accounts Raymond didn't know existed. It was measured in Tuesday and Thursday afternoons when Linda tutored Ethan at their apartment, their actual home now, because returning to the motel felt like admitting defeat, and both James and Linda were too stubborn for that. It was measured in the way Ethan's reading scores improved from a 2nd grade level to 4th grade in just over 2 weeks, his confidence blooming under Linda's patient guidance. "You're a natural teacher," James said one Thursday evening, watching through the doorway as Linda and Ethan worked through Charlotte's Web. "I love it," Linda admitted. "When I was at Charles Group, I hated the boardrooms, the politics. I wanted to teach. My father supported it, but Raymond..." She shook her head. "He said teaching was beneath a Charles. That real power came from control, not inspiration." "He sounds delightful," James said dryly. "He's a nightmare in a 3-piece suit." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, understanding maybe, or recognition that they were both rebuilding lives from fragments. James felt it strongest in the quiet moments. When Linda stayed for dinner because James had made too much pasta, he always made too much pasta now. When she laughed, really laughed, at Ethan's terrible knock-knock jokes. When she caught James staring and didn't look away. He hadn't felt this way since Sarah. Hadn't allowed himself to feel this way. "Dad likes you," Ethan announced one evening with the devastating honesty only 9-year-olds possess. "He smiles more when you're here." Linda's cheeks colored. "Well, I like being here." "Do you like him?" Ethan pressed. "Like in movies." "Ethan," James interjected, mortified. "That's enough." But Linda just smiled. "I think your dad is one of the best people I've ever met. Does that count?" "That counts," Ethan said sagely, then returned to his book as if he hadn't just detonated an emotional bomb in the living room. Later, after Ethan was in bed, James found Linda at the window, a habit she developed, always watching, always vigilant. "I'm sorry about earlier," he said. "Kids don't have filters. Don't apologize. He's right." Linda turned to face him, moonlight catching in her dark hair. "You do smile more." "So do I." The air between them felt charged, possibility humming just beneath the surface. "Linda, James started, but stopped. How do you tell someone you're falling for them when your wife's photo still sits on the mantel? When grief and guilt and something dangerously close to hope are all tangled together?" "I know," Linda said softly. "Me too." They didn't kiss. Not yet. But the promise of it hung in the air like the first warm day of spring, inevitable, just waiting for the right moment. But even as something beautiful grew between them, shadows lengthened. It started small. A black sedan that James swore he'd seen 3 times in 2 days, different parking spots, same license plate. When he tried to get a photo, it drove away. Linda's phone ringing at odd hours, 3 a.m., 5 a.m., but only silence on the other end when she answered. After the 5th call, she stopped answering entirely. Then, 2 weeks after the motel incident, Linda arrived for their Tuesday session looking shaken. "Someone broke into my storage unit," she said quietly, while Ethan practiced reading in the other room. "The one where I keep my father's files. Nothing was stolen, but everything was moved. They were searching for something." "Did you call the police?" "And say what?" "That I'm a dead woman whose storage unit was ransacked." Linda's voice was tight with frustration. "They're sending a message, James. They want me to know they can reach me anywhere." That night, James couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the break-in, about the black sedan, about Linda's pale face when she talked about Raymond. Around 2 a.m., thirsty and restless, he padded into the living room for water. Linda's tablet was on the coffee table. She'd been showing Ethan videos about space exploration earlier and must have forgotten it. The screen lit up at his touch, and James was about to set it down when he saw the folder name, Accident Evidence, Do Not Open. He should have respected her privacy. He should have closed the tablet and gone back to bed. But something, instinct maybe, or the same impulse that had made him defend a stranger in a mall, made him click it open. The first document was a police report from October 14, 2020. Standard Accident Investigation. Brake failure listed as probable cause, pending mechanical inspection. The second document was from a private investigator, dated 6 months later, re. Charles Vehicle Sabotage Investigation. James's blood ran cold as he read. Brake line modifications inconsistent with factory specifications. Evidence suggests deliberate tampering approximately 48 to 72 hours before accident. Work order found in confidential files traces to private auto shop. Owner confirms Raymond Charles authorized special maintenance on Gregory Charles's vehicle 3 days before fatal crash. Shop owner paid $75,000 for silence. Signed NDA. There were photos. Close-ups of brake lines with precision cuts disguised as wear. Emails between Raymond and the shop owner. Bank transfers. It wasn't an accident. Raymond had killed his own brother. You shouldn't have looked at that. James spun around. Linda sat in the doorway of the guest room, wrapped in one of his old sweatshirts, her wheelchair position perfectly silent. Linda, this is, James struggled for words. This is murder. This is evidence of murder. I know what it is. Her voice was hollow. I've been gathering it for 3 years. Private investigators, mechanics, forensic experts who owed my father favors. Every piece of proof that my uncle didn't just steal my company, he killed my father to get it. Then why haven't you gone to the police? To the FBI? This is. Because I'm dead, James. Linda's composure cracked. Because the moment I surface with accusations against Raymond Charles, billionaire CEO, he'll bury me in legal proceedings before I can blink. He'll say I'm mentally unstable, fabricating evidence, a con artist pretending to be his dead niece. He'll have doctors testify about my delusions. He'll paint me as a paralyzed woman so desperate for attention and money that I'd slander a grieving uncle. She wheeled closer, and James could see tears tracking down her face. I've watched him do it to others, James. Business rivals who challenged him. Journalists who investigated too closely. He destroys them systematically, legally, so thoroughly that no one believes them anymore. And I've been too afraid to face that alone. James knelt beside her wheelchair, taking her hands in his. Then don't face it alone. You have Ethan to think about. I'm thinking about him. What kind of man would I be teaching him to become if I walked away from this? If I let a murderer win because it was safer? James, he'll come after you. After Ethan. Then we'd better make sure the evidence is somewhere he can't reach it. James squeezed her hands gently. Linda, you've been surviving on your own for 5 years. Let someone stand beside you for once. Linda looked at him, really looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. The fear was still there, but underneath it was something else. Hope, maybe. Or trust. I'm scared, she whispered. Me too, James admitted. But I'm more scared of what happens if we do nothing. Outside, unnoticed by either of them, a black sedan pulled into the apartment complex parking lot. The driver made a phone call. They're together at his apartment. The kid's asleep. Should we move now? On the other end, Raymond Charles's voice was ice cold. Not yet. Let them think they're safe a little longer. Fear is more effective when it comes unexpected. He hung up and smiled. Because hunters don't rush their prey. They wait for the perfect moment to strike. The perfect moment came on a Wednesday afternoon, outside Ethan's school. James was early for pickup, parked in his usual spot near the flagpole, scrolling through news articles about corporate fraud cases, trying to understand what they were up against. He didn't notice the man approaching until knuckles rapped against his window. Jeff. The store manager looked different without his retail vest and manufactured authority. Smaller somehow. Tired. There were dark circles under his eyes and his hands trembled slightly as James lowered the window. We need to talk, Jeff said, glancing over his shoulder like he expected someone to be watching. Not here. Coffee shop across the street. 5 minutes. I'm not going anywhere with you. Linda's in danger. Real danger. If you care about her at all, you'll meet me. Jeff's voice cracked on the last word. Please. Something in his desperation felt genuine. Against his better judgment, James texted Linda. Something came up, we'll be 10 minutes late for pickup, and followed Jeff across the street. The coffee shop was nearly empty, just a barista scrolling her phone and an elderly couple sharing a muffin. Jeff chose a corner booth, away from windows, and waited until James sat down before speaking. I need you to understand something, Jeff started. I'm not a bad person. I'm just someone who made bad choices for good reasons. Is this the part where you explain why you tried to frame Linda for shoplifting? James kept his voice low but hard. I didn't know what they'd do with the video, Jeff said quickly. I swear. Raymond just told me to confirm it was her. To create a scene that would flush her out of hiding. He said she was mentally unstable, that she needed help. I thought, he stopped, running a hand over his face. I thought I was helping. By humiliating a disabled woman? By $50,000, okay? Jeff's voice rose, then dropped to a harsh whisper. $50,000 to identify her and create a scenario where she'd have to prove her identity. That's what he paid me. And I took it because my daughter has leukemia and our insurance won't cover the experimental treatment she needs. The anger in James's chest didn't disappear, but it complicated itself. So you sold out Linda to save your daughter. I sold out someone I thought was a con artist to save my daughter, Jeff corrected. That's what Raymond told me, that she was an imposter trying to steal from the Charles family. It wasn't until after the video went viral that I realized who she really was. What she really was. And what's that? Innocent. Jeff's voice broke. She's innocent, and I helped paint a target on her back, and now Raymond's going to kill her like he killed her father. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. You know about the accident, James said carefully. I overheard a phone call. 3 days ago. Raymond was talking to his head of security about handling the Linda situation the same way they handled Gregory. He said brake failures are tragic but believable, especially for wheelchair-accessible vehicles with all those modifications. James felt ice flood his veins. He's planning another accident. Worse. He's planning to make it look like you did it. You and Linda have been seen together constantly. He's building a narrative, unstable single father, develops obsession with vulnerable woman, murder-suicide when she rejects him. Jeff pulled out his phone, showing James a series of photos, James and Linda at the grocery store. Ethan pushing her wheelchair. James helping her into his car. He's been documenting everything. Building a case. When Linda dies, and they make you the suspect, who's going to believe you? A warehouse worker with no legal resources against the Charles Group's lawyers. James's hands clenched into fists. Why are you telling me this? Because I can't, Jeff's voice cracked. I can't have another death on my conscience. I took Raymond's money. I played my part. But I won't be the reason someone else dies. Even if it costs me everything. It will cost you everything, James said coldly. When this comes out. I know. But maybe that's what I deserve. Jeff slid a flash drive across the table. Everything I have. Photos of Raymond's surveillance team. Bank transfers. Recordings of phone calls I made. It's not enough to convict him, but it's enough to show pattern of behavior. Intent. James stared at the flash drive like it might explode. There's one more thing, Jeff added. Raymond knows about the evidence Linda's been gathering. He's got someone inside her investigator's office. Whatever you're planning, whatever move you're going to make, he already knows about it. James picked up Ethan, drove home on autopilot, and immediately called Linda. She arrived within 20 minutes, her face tight with concern. What happened? James told her everything while Ethan did homework at the kitchen table, headphones on, blessedly oblivious. He watched Linda's expression shift from shock to anger to something close to despair. He's 3 steps ahead, she said when James finished. He's always 3 steps ahead. Then we changed the game. James grabbed his laptop. We leak everything. Not to police, not to lawyers, to the media. Every news outlet we can find. Make it too public for him to bury. James, if we do that. What? He'll come after us? He's already coming after us, Linda. He's planning to kill you and frame me for it. We're out of time for careful. But Ethan is exactly why we can't wait. James's voice was fierce. I will not let my son grow up in a world where men like Raymond Charles can murder people and face no consequences. I won't. Linda looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. We do this together. They spent the next 3 hours compiling everything: Linda's evidence about the brake tampering, Jeff's recordings and photos, financial documents showing Raymond's embezzlement, medical records proving Linda's identity. James created anonymous email accounts and drafted a message to 50 journalists, civil rights organizations, and corporate watchdog groups. Ready? James asked, his finger hovering over the send button. Linda took his hand. Ready. He clicked send. For 30 seconds, they sat in silence, waiting for the world to change. Then Linda's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered on speaker. Linda. Raymond's voice was smooth, cultured, and absolutely devoid of warmth. I'm disappointed. I thought we'd raised you better than to embarrass the family in public. How did you? Linda started. Your investigator's IT specialist is on my payroll. Has been for 2 years. Every email you send gets copied to my team, including the rather dramatic evidence dump you just attempted. He paused. Which I've already had intercepted and scrubbed from every server before it could be opened. Quite expensive, but worth it. James felt his stomach drop. You have 2 choices, Raymond continued conversationally. Option 1, you disappear again. Properly this time. I'll give you $2 million and a new identity in a country with no extradition treaty. You live quietly, never speak my name again, and I pretend you don't exist. And option 2. Linda's voice shook. I stop pretending to be civilized. The warmth drained completely from Raymond's voice. The warehouse where James works has faulty wiring, I'm told. Tragically, these old buildings go up so fast. His son's school has crosswalks that aren't properly monitored. Children dart into traffic all the time. Accidents happen, Linda. You of all people should understand that. The threat was crystal clear. You have 24 hours to decide, Raymond said. After that, I stopped being patient. The line went dead. Linda looked at James, her face white. He's going to kill you. Both of you. Because I couldn't just stay hidden. No. James's voice was hard. He's going to try. But we're not done yet. James, he intercepted everything. Everything we sent through traceable channels. James pulled out the flash drive Jeff had given him. But Jeff didn't get this evidence from Linda's investigator. He got it directly from Raymond's operation. Which means Raymond doesn't know we have it. Hope flickered in Linda's eyes. You want to try again? I want to try smarter. James stood, his mind racing. Raymond thinks he's won because he's always 3 steps ahead. So we stop playing his game. We play a different one. What game? James met her eyes. The one where we stop hiding and start fighting back. Outside, in a black sedan parked 3 buildings down, a man with a camera lowered his lens. They're planning something, he reported into his phone. Should I move in? No, Raymond's voice was ice. Let them plan. Let them hope. It makes the fall so much more satisfying. But what Raymond didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that James had already made a call before Linda arrived. To a reporter he'd met during the viral video chaos. Someone Raymond's team hadn't vetted. Someone who was very interested in stories about corporate corruption and murdered heirs. The game was changing. Raymond just didn't know it yet. The lawsuit hit the news 48 hours later like a carefully orchestrated avalanche. Charles Group heiress impersonator exposed. Family files fraud charges against woman claiming to be dead relative. James saw it first on his phone during his lunch break at the warehouse, nearly choking on his coffee as he read the headline. The article featured a professionally shot photo of Raymond Charles, distinguished, gray at the temples, wearing an expression of pained dignity. It breaks my heart to do this, Raymond was quoted as saying, but this woman has been exploiting my family's tragedy for financial gain. My niece, Linda, died 5 years ago alongside my beloved brother. This imposter is desecrating their memory. The lawsuit was comprehensive and devastating, 62 pages accusing Linda of fraud, identity theft, attempted extortion, and emotional manipulation. It claimed she was a mentally unstable woman named Linda Brennan who had become obsessed with a Charles family tragedy and convinced herself she was the dead heiress. Medical experts were cited. Psychiatrists discussed delusional disorder. The family's grief counselor testified about how the imposter's claims had reopened old wounds. And there, buried in the supporting evidence, was a list of witnesses who would testify to Linda's elaborate deception. Jeff Morrison's name was at the top. "It's brilliant," Linda said flatly when James showed her the article that evening. She sat at his kitchen table, her tablet displaying the same lawsuit he'd been reading. "Absolutely brilliant. He's turned my resurrection into mental illness. If I fight back, I'm a con artist. If I provide evidence, I'm a desperate woman with fabricated documents. He's boxed me in perfectly. There has to be something." "There's nothing, James. Look at this." She scrolled to page 47. "He's got my medical records sealed as privacy protection for the deceased. Got death certificates, closed casket funeral records, testimonials from people at my memorial service. On paper, Linda Charles died in 2020. Any evidence I provide gets filtered through that lens. What about DNA testing? Who do I compare it to? My father's dead. My mother's dead. Raymond would claim any match is coincidental or fabricated." Linda's voice was hollow. "He spent 5 years building this narrative. I've spent 5 years hiding. Guess which story sounds more believable?" Ethan emerged from his bedroom, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Why are you guys yelling?" "We're not yelling, buddy," James said quickly. "Just talking about grown-up stuff. Go back to bed." "Is Linda in trouble?" Ethan looked between them with that uncanny perception children have. "Because of the bad man from the store?" Linda's expression softened. "A little bit of trouble. But your dad's helping me figure it out." "Good. Dad fixes things." Ethan yawned. "That's what dads do." After he'd gone back to bed, Linda whispered, "He has more faith in you than I have in myself right now." "Then borrow mine," James said, "because I'm not giving up on this." His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Press conference scheduled for Monday, 10 a.m. Jefferson's Lux. Raymond Charles will address the fraud publicly. Thought you should know. A friend." "Who's that from?" Linda asked. "I don't know. But they're telling us Raymond's going public. Monday morning." James checked the date. "That's 4 days from now." "He wants maximum media coverage," Linda said. "He's going to parade Jeff out there, have him testify about my shoplifting, paint me as a troubled woman who creates scenes for attention. Then he'll weaponize sympathy, the grieving uncle forced to expose a cruel hoax. So we expose him first." "With what, James?" "He intercepted our evidence dump. Jeff's flash drive is helpful, but it's not definitive. And the reporter you contacted, Sarah Chun, investigative journalist for the Tribune. She's good, Linda. Really good. If she publishes anything before the press conference, Raymond will sue her and the paper into oblivion. He'll claim defamation, cherry-pick facts, bury them in legal fees." Linda shook her head. "We need something undeniable. Something so clear that even Raymond's lawyers can't spin it." James stared at the lawsuit on the screen, at Jeff's name in the witness list, and something clicked. "The security footage," he said slowly. "From Jefferson's Lux. The day Jeff accused you." "What about it?" "Raymond's using that incident as proof you're unstable, that you create public disturbances, steal, manipulate people. But what if the footage shows something different?" Linda frowned. "Tony checked the cameras that day. There was no theft." "No. But what if there was something else on that footage? Something that proves Jeff was working for Raymond from the beginning." Getting access to Jefferson's Lux security footage should have been impossible. James was a warehouse worker with no legal authority, no connections, and no reason a retail store would hand over surveillance records. But he had something better, a 9-year-old son with an exceptional memory and a warehouse full of delivery drivers who knew every business owner in town. "Marcus," James said, catching his supervisor during shift change, "didn't you say your brother-in-law manages Jefferson's Lux?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, took over after Jeff got fired." "Why?" "Jeff got fired 2 weeks ago. Some corporate shakeup. New management came in, cleaned house." Marcus studied James. "Why do you ask?" "I need a favor. A big one. It took 3 days, 2 bottles of decent whiskey, and a promise that James would help Marcus move furniture next weekend. But on Sunday evening, James sat in his apartment with a USB drive containing Jefferson's Luck security footage from the day of Linda's accusation. Linda wheeled closer as he plugged it into his laptop. "This feels like a Hail Mary." "Those work sometimes," James muttered, pulling up the files. The footage was time-stamped and separated by camera. James found the one overlooking the fragrance counter and scrolled to 2:47 p.m., 10 minutes before the confrontation. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Customers browsed. Staff restocked shelves. Linda wheeled through the aisle, stopping occasionally to examine products. Then Jeff appeared. He wasn't on the floor yet, still in the back office, visible through an open door. He was on his phone, speaking to someone. The angle was wrong to see his face clearly, but his body language was tense, animated. The call lasted 90 seconds. When it ended, Jeff pulled something from his pocket, a small bottle. "Perfume." "Oh my God," Linda whispered. They watched as Jeff emerged from the office, the perfume palmed in his hand. He approached Linda's position, but she'd moved to the next aisle. He followed, waited, and when she reached for a product on a high shelf, momentarily distracted, Jeff moved behind her wheelchair. The camera angle was perfect. It showed Jeff's hand dropping the perfume bottle into the side pocket of Linda's wheelchair bag. Shows him stepping back. Shows him pulling out his phone again, making another quick call. 3 minutes later, Jeff's voice boomed across the store. "I saw you slip that perfume into your bag." "He planted it," James said, his voice shaking with anger. "He framed you from the beginning. And he's about to testify under oath that I'm a mentally unstable thief." Linda's hands trembled. "James, this changes everything. We need to get this to Sarah Chun. Tonight. What if Raymond intercepts it again?" "He won't." James was already copying the file to multiple drives. "Because we're not sending it digitally. We're hand-delivering it to her office. And we're bringing backup." Backup. James made a phone call. It rang 3 times before a tired voice answered. "Jeff? It's James Nicholas. We need to talk. In person. Now." They met at a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. Jeff looked worse than he had at the coffee shop, thinner, haunted, like a man who hadn't slept in days. "I can't testify," he said before James could speak. "I know Raymond expects me to, but I can't. I won't." "Good," James said, sliding his laptop across the table. "Because we've got something better." He showed Jeff the footage. Watched the color drain from the man's face. "I didn't think they'd keep the tapes this long," Jeff whispered. "Raymond said all footage gets wiped weekly." "New management, different policies," James said. "Jeff, this proves you framed Linda. Which means everything Raymond's built his case on, your witness testimony about her theft, is based on a lie. He'll destroy me. He's going to destroy all of us if we don't stop him first." Linda's voice was steady now, certain. "But you have a choice. You can run, hide, let Raymond win, and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Or you can stand up and tell the truth. My daughter will grow up knowing her father did the right thing when it mattered," James finished. "Isn't that worth something?" Jeff stared at the frozen footage on the screen, his own hand, caught in the act of deception. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. "What do you need me to do?" Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. By 9 a.m., news vans surrounded Jefferson's Lux. Reporters jockeyed for position. Raymond Charles stood on a makeshift stage, flanked by lawyers and PR representatives, looking every inch the wounded billionaire forced to confront painful truths. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. At 9:47, Sarah Chun published her article online. Exclusive, security footage shows Charles Group heir framed for theft, corporate conspiracy exposed. By 9:52, the article had 40,000 shares. By 9:58, every reporter at the press conference had read it. And at exactly 10 a.m., as Raymond Charles stepped to the microphone to denounce the mentally unstable imposter who dared claim his dead niece's identity, James Nicholas walked through the crowd with Linda Charles beside him, Jeff Morrison one step behind, and a USB drive containing the truth in his pocket. "Mr. Charles," James's voice cut through the crowd, amplified by a dozen microphones swinging in his direction. "Before you say anything else, there's something the world needs to see." Raymond's face remained perfectly composed, but his eyes betrayed him. Because for the first time in 5 years, Raymond Charles had no idea what was coming next. The moment stretched like glass about to shatter. Raymond Charles stood at the podium, microphone live, cameras from every major network pointed at his face. Behind him, a massive screen displayed the Charles Group logo, elegant, pristine, built on 30 years of carefully crafted reputation. In front of him, James Nicholas held up a USB drive like it was a grenade with a pin already pulled. "Security personnel, please escort this man," Raymond began, his voice smooth, controlled. "I'm James Nicholas," James spoke over him, projecting his voice the same way he had in Jefferson's Lux 3 weeks ago when he defended a stranger. "The unstable single father you've been building a narrative around. And this," he held the drive higher, "is security footage from the day your employee Jeff Morrison framed Linda Charles for shoplifting." The crowd of reporters surged forward. Questions erupted like fireworks. Raymond's smile never faltered. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly the kind of disruption I warned you about. This man has been manipulated by a disturbed woman." "Then let's watch the footage," Linda's voice cut through the chaos. She wheeled forward, and the crowd parted instinctively. Some reporters recognized her from the viral video. Others gasped, seeing her face beside the photos of deceased Linda Charles, displayed on Raymond's presentation materials. The resemblance was undeniable. "You've spent the last hour telling everyone I'm an imposter," Linda continued, her voice steady despite the 100 camera lenses now focused on her. "That I'm mentally unstable. That I'm desecrating your family's memory." She looked directly at Raymond. "So let's show them the truth, Uncle Raymond. Unless you're afraid of it." Raymond's jaw tightened, just for a second, barely visible, but every camera caught it. "This is a circus. This is justice." Sarah Chen stepped forward from the press crowd, her press badge from the Tribune visible. "Mr. Charles, my publication has already released the security footage online. It's currently being viewed by 300,000 people and climbing. You can either address it here, or we can watch you refuse to address it. Either way, the truth is already out." For 5 years, Raymond Charles had controlled every narrative, anticipated every move, crushed every threat before it could take root. But he hadn't anticipated this: a warehouse worker, a dead heiress, and a guilty store manager walking into his perfectly orchestrated press conference with evidence he didn't know existed. "Fine," Raymond said, his smile turning sharp as a knife. "Let's see this so-called evidence. I'm sure it will prove to be as delusional as everything else Ms. Brennan has fabricated." A tech assistant, one of Raymond's own people, reluctantly took the USB drive and plugged it into the presentation system. The Charles Group logo disappeared. The security footage filled the screen. The first minute played in silence. Customers browsing, Linda wheeling through the fragrance aisle, Jeff in the back office on his phone. "This proves nothing," Raymond said confidently. "We're watching normal store operations." Then Jeff appeared on screen, the small perfume bottle palmed in his hand. The crowd leaned forward collectively. The camera angle was perfect, showing Jeff approach Linda's wheelchair from behind, showing his hand drop the bottle into her bag side pocket, showing him step back and make another phone call. 3 minutes later, footage from a different camera angle showed Jeff's confrontation. "I saw you slip that perfume into your bag." The room erupted. Questions flew like bullets. Cameras swung between Raymond's face and the screen. Reporters shouted over each other, trying to be heard. "That footage is doctored." Raymond's composure finally cracked, his voice rising over the chaos. "This is a desperate attempt to—" "It's not doctored," Jeff Morrison stepped forward, his voice barely audible but somehow cutting through the noise. "It's real. I did that. I planted the perfume in her bag." Every camera swiveled to Jeff. He looked smaller under the lights, diminished by guilt and sleepless nights. But when he spoke again, his voice was stronger. "Raymond Charles paid me $50,000 to identify Linda and create a public incident that would force her to prove her identity. He told me she was an imposter, a con artist. I believed him because I needed the money." Jeff's voice cracked. "My daughter has leukemia. I thought I was doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. But I was just doing the wrong thing. Period." "This man is clearly disturbed," Raymond started. "I have the emails," Jeff continued, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. "The wire transfers. Recordings of our phone conversations. Everything." He looked at Linda, and his eyes were full of tears. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I did to you." Sarah Chun was already pulling up the email exchanges on her tablet, holding them up for cameras to photograph. From r.charles@charlesgroup.com to j.morrison@jeffersonslux.com. Subject: compensation for services. Jeff, confirming our arrangement. $50,000 upon positive ID and public incident. Make it believable. Create witnesses. She needs to be forced into the open. RC. The room exploded again. Raymond's lawyers were already on their phones, frantically trying to control the damage. PR representatives whispered urgently. But it was too late. The footage was live-streaming, the emails were being screenshotted and shared, and the narrative Raymond had spent 5 years building was crumbling in real time. Enough. Linda's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. She wheeled herself to the center of the makeshift stage, positioning herself directly in front of the cameras. For a moment, she just sat there, letting the world see her. Really see her. Then she spoke. My name is Linda Marie Charles. I was born on March 15, 1997, at Mercy General Hospital. My mother, Catherine Charles, died of breast cancer when I was 12. My father, Gregory Charles, built the company you see behind me from a single boutique in downtown Portland. He taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in the dignity you show others. Her voice was calm, each word carefully chosen. 5 years ago, my father and I were in a car accident on Riverside Highway. An accident that wasn't an accident, it was murder. The brake lines in our car were deliberately sabotaged on my uncle's orders. My father died instantly. I survived, but my spine was severed at L1. I'll never walk again. Raymond opened his mouth to interrupt, but Linda raised her hand. You called me a liar, she continued, looking directly at her uncle. You called me mentally unstable. An imposter. A con artist. You held a funeral for me while I was still alive, erased me from existence, stole my inheritance, and built your empire on my father's grave. She paused, letting the silence amplify her next words. But here's what you forgot, Uncle Raymond. Truth doesn't need legs to stand. It only needs proof. She gestured to the screen behind her, where the footage of Jeff planting evidence still played on loop. This footage proves you fabricated evidence against me. The emails prove you paid someone to do it. The bank records, she nodded to Sarah Chun, who held up her tablet again, prove you've been embezzling from the Charles Group for 5 years. Funneling money to offshore accounts, falsifying board reports, using company resources for personal surveillance. These are baseless accusations, Raymond tried again. These are documented facts, Linda corrected. Facts that Sarah Chun has been investigating for 3 weeks. Facts that are being handed to the FBI as we speak. As if on cue, 2 men in dark suits appeared at the edge of the crowd, FBI badges visible on their belts. Raymond's face went from red to white. But most importantly, Linda continued, her voice softening, this proves that you were so afraid of a paralyzed woman telling the truth that you destroyed evidence, paid off witnesses, and attempted to murder her a second time. She rolled forward slightly, until she was close enough to Raymond that the cameras caught them in the same frame, the billionaire CEO and the niece he tried to erase. You tried to bury me twice, Uncle Raymond. First in that car, then in lies. But I crawled out both times. Her voice was steady, powerful. Not for revenge. Not for money. But for truth. Because that's what my father taught me. And that's what you can never take away. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Jeff Morrison stepped forward, his voice breaking. I lied. About the shoplifting. About Linda being unstable. About everything. Raymond Charles paid me to destroy her reputation, and I did it. But I'm telling the truth now. He looked at the FBI agents. I'll testify. To all of it. I'll give you everything I have. The dam broke. Reporters surged forward with questions. The FBI agents moved toward Raymond, whose lawyers immediately surrounded him. Camera flashes erupted like lightning. But in the center of it all, Linda sat perfectly still in her wheelchair, spine straight, chin raised, exactly the way James had first seen her 3 weeks ago. Dignified. Unbroken. Victorious. James pushed through the crowd until he reached her side. You did it, he said quietly. Linda looked up at him, and for the first time in 5 years, she smiled without fear shadowing it. We did it. On the screen behind them, the security footage continued to loop. Jeff's hand, the planted evidence, the moment of deception that had unraveled an entire conspiracy. And across every news network, every social media platform, every corner of the internet where the press conference was streaming live, one phrase was already trending. #Truth doesn't need legs. Raymond Charles was arrested 17 minutes later, charged with conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. The game had finally changed. And this time, truth had won. The aftermath of truth is never as clean as the movies make it seem. Raymond Charles was arrested on 17 charges, including conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, embezzlement, and witness tampering. His bail was set at $50 million, an amount even he couldn't easily access with his assets frozen pending investigation. Jeff Morrison gave his statement to the FBI, turned over every piece of evidence he had, and then vanished. Some said he'd fled to Canada. Others claimed South America. James hoped, quietly, that wherever Jeff had gone, his daughter was getting the treatment she needed. The media circus lasted for weeks. Every news outlet wanted an interview with Linda. Book deals were offered. Movie rights were discussed. The Charles Group's stock plummeted, then surged, then settled into anxious uncertainty as the board scrambled to distance themselves from Raymond's crimes. And through it all, Linda Charles, the woman who'd been dead for 5 years, had to figure out how to be alive again. 6 weeks after the press conference, the Charles Group Board of Directors formally reinstated Linda as the rightful heir and offered her the position of CEO. James found out about it from the news, not from Linda. They'd barely spoken since the FBI had taken over the investigation. A few texts here and there, "How are you holding up?" And "Ethan asks about you," but nothing substantial. Linda had been swept up in depositions, legal proceedings, and the impossible task of reclaiming an identity that had been buried for half a decade. James told himself it was natural. She had her life to rebuild. He had his warehouse shifts and his son's homework and his small apartment that suddenly felt smaller now that Linda wasn't filling it with books and laughter. He told himself he was fine with it. He told himself it was always going to end this way. The hero helps the princess reclaim her kingdom, and then he goes back to his ordinary life because that's how these stories work. He told himself a lot of things that weren't quite true. The news that Linda had declined the CEO position came on a Tuesday morning. James was loading pallets at the warehouse when his phone buzzed with the alert. Linda Charles declines Charles Group leadership, announces new foundation instead. He read the article during his break, standing in the harsh fluorescent light of the warehouse break room. "I'm grateful to the board for their faith in me," Linda was quoted as saying, "but I'm not the person to lead the Charles Group into its next chapter. My father built this company on principles of dignity and equity. I want to honor that legacy differently." The article continued. Ms. Charles has announced the creation of the Charles Foundation, a non-profit organization focused on disability empowerment, workplace accessibility, and economic justice. "My father always said that real power isn't about what you control, it's about what you give away," Charles stated. "I'm giving this away to build something better." There was a photo accompanying the article. Linda at a press conference, wearing a navy blazer that probably cost more than James's car, her dark hair styled professionally. She looked confident, composed, every inch the heiress she'd been born to be. She looked like she belonged in a different world than his. James closed the article and went back to loading pallets. "Dad, why doesn't Linda come over anymore?" Ethan asked that evening over dinner, spaghetti again, because James's cooking repertoire hadn't expanded in the last 6 weeks. "She's busy, buddy. She's got a lot going on. But she said she'd help me finish Charlotte's Web." Ethan pushed pasta around his plate. "I'm on chapter 15. I want to tell her about it. Maybe you can email her." "It's not the same." Ethan looked up with those two knowing eyes. "Did you guys have a fight?" "No, we didn't fight." "Then why are you sad when you look at her pictures on the news?" James set down his fork. "Linda's life is really different now, Ethan. She's got important work to do. She's going to help a lot of people." "She helped us," Ethan said simply. "She made you smile again. Like you did before Mom died." The words hit James like a physical blow. "Buddy. I think you should tell her you miss her," Ethan continued with the devastating honesty of 9-year-olds everywhere. "Because I think she misses us too." James thought about Ethan's words for 3 days. He thought about them during his shifts, during the endless hours of loading and unloading, during the quiet evenings when he scrolled past news articles about Linda's foundation and felt something in his chest ache. He thought about them on Saturday morning when he took Ethan to Riverside Park, the same park where they'd scattered some of Sarah's ashes 3 years ago, the same park where Ethan had learned to ride a bike, the same park where James had learned that grief doesn't end but it does transform. Ethan was on the swings, pumping his legs hard enough to make James nervous, when a voice spoke behind him. "He's gotten taller." James spun around. Linda sat in her wheelchair at the edge of the playground, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, no designer blazer, no professional styling. Just Linda, looking exactly like she had those Tuesday and Thursday afternoons when she brought books and hope into their small apartment. Linda. His voice came out rougher than intended. What are you? How did you? I called your work. They said you had Saturdays off. This seemed like the kind of place you'd bring Ethan. She rolled closer, and James could see the uncertainty in her expression. Can we talk? James looked at Ethan, who'd spotted Linda and was waving frantically from the swings. Yeah, we can talk. They moved to a bench. James sat while Linda positioned her wheelchair beside it, both of them watching Ethan play but not really watching him at all. You've been avoiding me, Linda said after a moment. You've been busy. That's not why. She turned to face him fully. You've been pulling away. Ever since the press conference. I felt it. James couldn't deny it. Your life changed, Linda. You're a billionaire heiress starting a foundation. You're going to be on magazine covers and giving speeches. And he gestured at himself, a warehouse worker who lives in a 2-bedroom apartment with water-stained ceilings. Is that what you think this is about? Money. I think you deserve someone who fits into your world. James. Linda's voice was firm now. Do you know what my world was before you? It was hiding. It was fear. It was teaching online classes under a fake name and checking over my shoulder every time I left my apartment. That was my world. But now I have a choice, she interrupted. I can build whatever world I want. And I want to build one where a man who works double shifts to support his son is valued just as much as a CEO. Where kindness matters more than bank accounts. Where people stand up for strangers because it's the right thing to do. She reached for his hand. You stood up for me before you knew my name, James. Before you knew my story or my family or anything except that someone was being treated unfairly and you couldn't just walk away. That's not ordinary. That's extraordinary. And that's the kind of world I want to live in. The kind I want to build. James looked at their hands, his calloused and work-worn, hers strong from years of pushing her wheelchair, and felt something in his chest crack open. I'm scared, he admitted quietly. Sarah's only been gone 3 years. And Ethan's already attached to you. If this doesn't work, then we'll figure it out together, Linda said. But James, I'm not Sarah. I'm not trying to replace her. I'm just trying to be someone who makes you smile again. Someone who makes Ethan excited about reading. Someone who fits into your life, not the other way around. What if I mess this up? What if you don't? She leaned forward, and James met her halfway. The kiss was soft, tentative, a question more than an answer. It tasted like hope and possibility, and the kind of courage it takes to let yourself be vulnerable after loss. When they pulled apart, Ethan was standing 3 feet away, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. Finally, he announced loudly enough that several other parents turned to look. I thought you guys were never going to kiss. Linda laughed, that genuine warm sound that James had fallen in love with without realizing it. How long have you been standing there? James asked. Long enough. Ethan looked between them. Does this mean Linda's going to come over for spaghetti again? If your dad's cooking, I might have to teach him some new recipes first, Linda teased. Please do, Ethan said with complete seriousness. We've had spaghetti 17 times this month. They stayed at the park until sunset, watching Ethan play, talking about the foundation Linda was building, about James's idea to start night classes for a business degree, about Ethan's improving grades and his new obsession with space exploration. They talked about the future like it was something bright and possible instead of something to be feared. And when James finally drove them home, Linda's wheelchair folded in the trunk, Ethan chattering excitedly in the back seat about whether Linda would come to his school science fair, he realized something. Grief had taught him that life could be shattered in an instant. But love, real, earned, complicated love, was teaching him that it could also be rebuilt. Not the same as before. Never the same. But maybe, just maybe, something even better. That night, after Ethan was asleep and Linda had gone home, with promises to return Tuesday for their regular tutoring session, James found himself standing in front of Sarah's photo on the mantel. I think I'm ready, he whispered to the image of his late wife. I think I'm ready to be happy again. The photo didn't answer, but in the quiet of his small apartment, James felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Peace. 8 months later, autumn returned to the city with the same golden light and crisp wind that had witnessed the beginning of everything. James stood in front of what used to be Jefferson's Lux, barely recognizing it. The pretentious signage was gone. The marble facade had been replaced with warm brick and large windows. Where luxury handbags had once been displayed behind glass, there were now photographs, people in wheelchairs, people with prosthetics, people of all abilities learning, working, thriving. Above the entrance, elegant letters spelled out, "The Charles Community Center." "Dad, look." Ethan tugged at his sleeve, pointing to a bronze plaque beside the door. "It has our names on it." James leaned closer to read. "This center stands in honor of Gregory Charles, who believed that dignity is a right, not a privilege. It was made possible by the courage of those who stood up when standing up mattered most. In memory of Sarah Nicholas, whose kindness lives on through her family. And in celebration of every person who refuses to bow to injustice." James felt his throat tighten. Linda had insisted on including Sarah's name despite his protests. "She made you the man who defended a stranger," Linda had said. "She's part of this story too." "Mr. Nicholas." A young woman with a press badge approached. "We're about to start. Ms. Charles asked if you and your son would stand with her during the ribbon cutting." James nodded, taking Ethan's hand as they moved through the gathering crowd. The turnout was massive. News crews from every major network. Community members who'd heard about the center's programs. People in wheelchairs, on crutches, with service animals, with invisible disabilities, all gathered to witness something that felt less like a building opening and more like a promise being kept. Linda waited near the entrance, surrounded by board members and foundation staff, but her eyes found James immediately. She smiled, the kind of smile that still made his heart skip after 8 months, and gestured for him and Ethan to join her. "You didn't tell me this was going to be so big," James murmured as he reached her side. "Would you have come if I had?" Linda teased. "Probably not." "Exactly why I didn't tell you." She squeezed his hand briefly before turning to face the cameras and crowd. The mayor spoke first, praising the Charles Foundation's vision. Then several community leaders. Then a young man who'd been through the center's job training program and just landed his first full-time position. Finally, Linda rolled forward to the microphone. The crowd fell silent. 8 months ago, Linda began, her voice steady and clear, "I was accused of shoplifting in the store that used to stand here. I was humiliated, cornered, and treated as less than human, not because of anything I'd done, but because of who someone decided I was based on what they saw." She paused, letting the memory settle over the crowd. A stranger could have walked away that day. Most people do. Most people decide it's not their problem, not their business, not their battle. But James Nicholas didn't walk away. He stood up. Not because he knew my name or my story, but because he saw injustice and couldn't ignore it. Linda's eyes found James in the crowd. That moment changed everything. It exposed corruption, yes. It brought a criminal to justice, yes. But more than that, it reminded me what my father always believed, that strength isn't about walking tall or standing above others. Strength is about refusing to bow to injustice, no matter what form it takes. Linda gestured to the building behind her. This center isn't just a building. It's a promise. A promise that people with disabilities deserve more than pity or charity. They deserve opportunity, dignity, and power over their own lives. A promise that corporations built on exploitation will be held accountable. A promise that when someone stands up for what's right, they won't stand alone. She looked out at the faces in the crowd, some crying, some nodding, all listening. The Charles Community Center will provide job training, education, legal advocacy, and rehabilitation services. Everything is accessible. Everything is free. Because my father believed that the measure of a society is how it treats its most vulnerable members. And I intend to spend the rest of my life proving he was right. The crowd erupted in applause. Linda waited for it to quiet, then added softly, "But I didn't do this alone. None of us do anything alone. This center exists because of Jeff Morrison's courage to tell the truth. Because of Sarah Chen's journalism that refused to be silenced. Because of every person who shared that video, who demanded justice, who believed that one paralyzed woman's story mattered." She turned to James and Ethan. "And because of a single father who taught his son that heroes don't need capes, they just need to show up." Ethan beamed, practically vibrating with pride. Linda held out her hand, and Ethan rushed forward with a bouquet of sunflowers, bright yellow, impossible to miss, just like hope. "Thank you," Linda said, accepting the flowers. Then, loud enough for the microphones to catch, she added, "Your dad's the real hero, you know." Ethan grinned up at her. Mom used to say that heroes don't wear capes, they just show up. Dad showed up for you. He did, Linda agreed, her voice thick with emotion. And now we get to show up for everyone else. The ribbon cutting was ceremonial, oversized scissors, bright red ribbon, cameras flashing like lightning. But when the ribbon fell away and the doors opened, something shifted in the air. People streamed inside. A woman in a wheelchair rolled up the accessible ramp without assistance. A man with a prosthetic leg stopped to read the job training opportunities posted in the window. A mother with a young daughter who had Down syndrome asked about the educational programs. James watched it all, Ethan pressed against his side, and felt the weight of the last 8 months settle into something that felt like redemption. Linda rolled up beside them, sunflowers still balanced in her lap. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "Yeah," James said. "Yeah, I really am." She took his hand. "Want to go inside? Ethan's dying to see the library. I may have named a reading room after him." "You did what?" James stared at her. "The Ethan Nicholas Young Reader's Corner," Linda said innocently. "Complete with race car reading chairs and a collection of Charlotte's Web in 15 different languages." Ethan's eyes went wide. "That's the coolest thing ever." They moved inside together, James, Linda, and Ethan, joining the stream of people entering a building that had once been a symbol of everything wrong with judgment and prejudice, now transformed into everything right about second chances and justice. As they crossed the threshold, James glanced back at the street outside. The autumn wind stirred fallen leaves, carrying them in spirals down the sidewalk, the same wind that had blown 8 months ago when shame and humiliation had felt like the end of the story. But it hadn't been the end. It had been the beginning. Epilogue. The photo that ran in newspapers the next day showed Linda Charles at the ribbon cutting, flanked by James Nicholas and his son, all three of them smiling. The caption read, "Charles Community Center opens, built on foundation of courage and justice." But the story beneath the photo, the real story, was simpler than that. It was about a man who saw injustice and couldn't walk away. It was about a woman who refused to stay buried. It was about a boy who believed his father could fix anything, and maybe that belief made it true. It was about how a single moment in a shopping mall could ripple outward into something that changed laws, toppled empires, and reminded a city that ordinary people doing extraordinary things are what heroes have always been. A year later, James and Linda would get married in that same community center, surrounded by friends, family, and dozens of people whose lives had been transformed by the foundation's work. 2 years later, the Charles Foundation would expand to 6 cities, helping thousands of people with disabilities access education, employment, and justice. 5 years later, Ethan would write an essay for his college application about the day his father defended a stranger, and how it taught him that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about being afraid and standing up anyway. But on that autumn day, with cameras flashing and wind stirring and a building full of hope opening its doors, none of them knew what the future held. They only knew this. He stood up for a stranger in a wheelchair, never knowing he was standing up for a woman who'd one day change his life, his family, and the meaning of strength itself. And sometimes, that's exactly how the best stories begin. Not with certainty. Not with plans. But with one person deciding that justice matters more than comfort. That dignity matters more than silence. That standing up, even when you're scared, even when it costs you, even when you're just one person against something bigger. Always, always matters.
Thanks so much for watching till the end. If this story moved you, you're going to love what's coming next. It's even more surprising and emotional than this one. Go ahead and click the story on your screen right now, and see you in the next story.